Hello, everybody. I see you all flooding in now. I'll just wait a couple of minutes while the attendees join the webinar. Hi, good morning to everybody who are joining us. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes as people are beginning to join the webinar. Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Student Living France. I'm just going to wait a couple more seconds while people continue to join. Okay, fantastic. Hello and good morning, class community. Thank you for joining us today for our Student Living Forum France, sponsored by UGO. My name is Kellyanne Watson, and I am the Managing Director here at the Class Foundation, and I am joined today by Marcus, Head of Europe of Savills, Pierre, Head of Investment at UXCO, and Sebastian, Director of EQT Exeter. So before we start our French market deep dive today, I wanted to reflect on some data that the class has been working on and share some insights. So you should have received our new class fact sheets. I hope you all enjoyed reading those this morning. So I'm going to go over the investment barometer and the student living monitor data a little bit more closely, focusing on the French market. So France is the largest study cohort in Europe, with nearly 3 million students. But unfortunately, this market still faces many challenges with delivering suitable beds for its students. The student housing market in France is largely provided by the social housing sector, and for those who are able to deliver those private beds, can sometimes come across challenges such as complex policies, management agreement, issues around scale, size, and location compared to other neighbouring countries in Europe. So the investment barometer was published in November 2023 during our annual conference and is a joint venture with Savills. It indicated that France was within the top 5 countries for strategic investment over the next 2 to 5 years, along with Spain, Italy, Germany, and Portugal. Furthermore, the Student Living Monitor in 2023 alluded that the French students, both international and domestic, rated as some of the lowest mental health scores compared to the rest of Europe. Please note that the mental health index we use, the MHI-5, measures the mental health score from 0 to 100 and has a cutoff point as 60 relating to a positive mental health and above. So the average score in France was 53.8 compared to the average of 57, which is still lower than what is expected as being okay mental health. And you can see that in the bottom left-hand corner there. So also from this data, we found that 32% of students in France did not secure their first choice accommodation, citing that 43.5% was due to a lack of availability, and a further 20% was due to affordability. So to continue, 59% of students that we surveyed said they did not have access to mental health services, but rating highly in terms of amenities such as gyms and study spaces, that these did have a bigger impact on creating richer communities and spaces, which in turn fostered a higher mental health score. So with that in mind, the need for more inclusive, supportive living environments means that there has been a shift to more international business cases and funds. The need to deliver this type of asset has become more and more appealing. So this is why we've seen new entrants such as EQT, Greystar, and Camplus entering the French market. I am very, very excited to have Marcus Roberts by my side helping me co-create this session. He is somebody that has proactively monitored and worked alongside partners to ensure that the gap and the bridge between the supply and the demand for quality accommodation is met. So Marcus, I'm really excited and happy for you to take the stage, and also to the audience. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of this short data insight. So if you do have any questions, please post them in our Q&A section, and Aaron Ema will be reading those out in due course. So Marcus.
Many thanks, Kellyanne. And I will hopefully just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. So the data insight on PBSA market overview on France. So as Kellyanne so rightly said, according to national higher education ministries, at the last count, France has actually overtaken Germany as Europe's largest student market with 2.94 million students. France is able to point to particularly acute international student growth, which rose by about 8% between 2021 and 22. And as such, there's therefore a chronic undersupply and shortage in PBSA in France. In 2018, the French government committed to building 60,000 new student housing units between 2018 and 2022. By 2021, they'd significantly underperformed and had only delivered about 36,000 units. The existing supply, as we know, is fairly fragmented, with about 25% of the top 10 operators' beds owned in freehold by their capital partner. And the supply and demand dynamics have been particularly strong, with Gecina reporting about 7.1% like-for-like year-on-year rental growth in Q3 2023, and particularly strong levels of occupancy have been recorded across the board. So from the last count, as we say, this is just re-emphasizing the point that France is number one, and hence that is now definitely becoming my country of choice for further investment, for institutional capital to enter the market. For France to be on a par with the UK's provision maturity, it's estimated that we need to deliver an additional 500,000 bed spaces. So that's looking at the UK, as we can see here, which is about 33% of students can get access to purpose-built bed spaces. In France, it's about 16%. So France needs to build another 500,000 bed spaces to be on a par with the UK. So there's a long way to go, and hence we've got developer operators on the panel a little later on who will be explaining how they're going to do that, and what has obviously sort of been one of their sort of key theses for investing further into the French market. If we look at student growth during COVID-19, France recorded actually a higher number of French students passing their final exams. Similarly to the UK, I suppose, you know, exam results were sort of slightly reduced, and therefore that drove significant number of student numbers, or an increase in student numbers over the last few years. Coupled with that, international students have shown the most growth since COVID-19 pandemic, with about international students past 400,000 for the first time, and grew year on year by about 8%, which is the highest growth in France recorded in the last 15 years. So if we look at the supply and demand dynamics, there are roughly 6 students to every bed space, or that need a bed space in France, but the private PBSA ratio of fit for purpose quality is much lower, and that is probably about 16 students, or about a 6% provision rate. I say fit for purpose private PBSA, because a lot of the accommodation that we look at in France is actually owned and run by the state, and is on sort of university style accommodation, and probably run by an entity called CRUS. If we zoom in on Paris, Savills estimates that Paris is the 11th most expensive city globally for students, with rent, tuition and living expenses, and therefore offers relative affordability compared to the US, London and some Nordic cities. If we look at the operating competitor landscape, we've outlined here who the key integrated players are across France, but what is shown by this graph is that the top 10 private operators, there are very few that are own liquid portfolios or high quality stock in this market. Now that's because over the years, the French market has been predicated off a particular sort of financial instrument where operators put in place long-term leases, so it's up to 12-year leases on assets that are around sort of 100 to maybe 150, 175 units, and those are sold down on a fragmented basis, so unit by unit to individual investors, because there are tax breaks that are afforded to them, as well as selling a proportion, perhaps sort of split 50-50 between transactions of individual investors, but then 50% to institutional capital. So the likes of a Periel, the likes of AXA and Amundi, who have invested heavily into the PBSA market. What is also clear is that there's a preference to seek greater operational risk and reward by moving from the historic lease model to the direct let and management agreements model that is sort of starting to move across Europe. And I think this has been one of the greatest barriers to entry for capital, for both owner operators, but also for institutional investors to enter the French market. So now is the time. And not least, as we have here, student cities are particularly well spread across France. And what we've outlined here is more than cities with more than 40,000 students across the top 20 academies. IDF Île-de-France accounts for in excess of 770,000 students. There is a strong regional spread across all French cities, as you can see. From an investment standpoint, there's been greater focus on more regional locations, with investors searching for greater returns and being able to benefit from first mover advantages with a deep demand pool seeking modern and high quality product. In terms of the investor overview, so 2023 was an important year for the French student accommodation sector for a number of reasons, and a slight downtick in volumes does not truly tell the full story. It shows the resilience of the French market, with which forecasts indicated could have been severely hampered given its core pricing point. The 2023 volumes are only 5% below the 5-year average, which includes the record-breaking year in 2019, which marked AXA, Brookfield and Greystar's entry into the French market. It also demonstrated the strong conviction of integrated investor operators that continued to push on with their aggregation strategies, so such as the likes of Clay, UXCO and Greystar acquiring sites. Greystar have also started to complement their existing portfolio with new developments, and their first scheme is expected to open near La Défense this summer. There are also new entrants in the form of EQT, which further helps to increase the proportion of international capital entering France. And the bottom right pie chart here shows how challenging this has historically been in France, as international parties have struggled to find the right party to enter alongside and help navigate the challenging planning, development and legal environment. Easiest routes to entry, as we know, have typically been through international parties via joint ventures, recaps or platform acquisitions with operating companies. So if we start to look at the European PBSA yield evolution, cost of debt has increased some sort of 330 bips since Q1 2022, and the yield to debt swap spread has fallen by almost 2/3. To add to that, financing conditions have become much more onerous. So how have certain investors been able to operate, and why has PBSA pricing been least affected? Well, it comes back to the supply and demand dynamics, and in particular rental growth. The rebased pricing has allowed certain investors, Aberdeen, La Française, UXCO, DEA, EQT and Greystar to continue to deploy capital between the 4.25% to 5% range. Interestingly, there has been greater activity in the regional cities such as Bordeaux, Toulouse, Nice and Montpellier. And I'm sure we'll touch on EQT's investment into Bordeaux and who and how and why they chose Bordeaux as that particular opportunity and target market. So if you look at sort of key transactions, as we mentioned, Campus announced its partnership with DEA and Partners Group to mark their first entry into France, as well as Barcelona. This marks a significant entry of an international party into France and expanding Campus's operational capabilities beyond Italy and Spain, where it currently manages around probably about 10,000 beds. Interestingly to note, the second project there, the ECLAT Massy scheme, which opened its third phase this academic year and now stands at around 1,800 beds, which I think elevates it to the largest student housing project or so co-living project in Europe. The third column there with EQT Exeter, as you mentioned, that's their first entry into the French PBSA sector, and again builds on their expertise and a previous historic investment in the UK, Ireland, and Spain. We expect that they will be looking to perhaps develop their Nest platform that they operate in Spain into about sort of 100 residences across France over the next coming years. And then finally, we have Greystar, who acquired Actava in 2019. And these two transactions were key deals in 2023 with their project in Paris, which is set to be about 650 beds. Opening later this year. So, as you said, key drivers for the French PBSA. Where do we look for? Where is it going? What's the outlook? I have to say that having obviously sort of Valentine's Day yesterday, today is definitely a good reason to fall in love with France. Not only is it the largest student housing the largest student population in Europe, there's a chronic undersupply. And if we look at the student to bed ratios comparing the UK to the mature market to where France is currently, we would feel that there's around 500,000 bed space shortfall to reach that maturity. So I think along with developers and operators, a mature operating environment in operator base in France, now is a really good time to look at France in detail and hopefully get those checkbooks out. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. How wonderful was that presentation? I'm here for the campaign slogan, now is the time and fall in love. It feels like a completely different shift towards the market, especially over like the last 3 years when I've been speaking about lots of different markets across Europe. It's definitely a more exciting space, maybe compared to the likes of, the Netherlands at the moment, that is, maybe getting a little bit more of the negativity, which prior had, people shouting about how much of an interesting market that was. So I'm really excited to dig a little bit deeper into that. And I'm excited also to bring Marcus into this investment insight panel with us. And I guess introduce the French powerhouse, UXCO, a market leader with a 360 investor, developer, operator approach, offering over 10,000 beds with 2 different brands catering to 2 different audiences. And then on the other side of that, we've got EQT Exeter, a reputable global player with, 30 billion plus in the real estate sector, who have just recently entered the French market and acquired 2 student residences in Bordeaux. So I'm really excited to bring you both into this panel. Pierre, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, with pleasure. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, I don't know why the camera isn't working, but it's fine.
As long as we can hear you, that's fine, Pierre.
So I'm head of investment and asset management at UXCO. Quickly, what is UXCO? This is a company created 20 years ago by somebody called Patrice Cavalier, French entrepreneur. And initially, UXCO was a pure developer. Then we became an operator for operated residential, so PBSA on the one end, and hospitality business on the other end, with the brand called Apartity, which is the leader today of apart hotel asset class in France. And 5 years ago, big change for us with the acquisition of the group by the private equity platform Brookfield. And with this big change, we added the third part of the group, which is the investment side dedicated to PBSA. But let's focus on this part. So who are we in the French PBSA market? We are the third player in number of beds. Thanks to Marcus. We saw that a few minutes ago. So the global number of beds is 14,000 units. And we are the first player if you consider only the owners and operators. So as of today, we own 1 billion euro of AUM in the French market for PBSA. So for Brookfield, this asset class is really strategic in Europe, but especially in France with us. So by 2027, we target to get a global number of beds of 25,000. So it means to multiply by 2 the number of current beds. And as you said, Kellyanne, we have 2 different brands. The first one is the, let's say, classic one, good quality and affordable offer, which is called UXCO Students. And another one we created 5 years ago, which is called ECLA. And just to finish the introduction, Patrice Cavalier, as I said, was the founder of UXCO, is somebody who is a visionary entrepreneur. And the thing is, 5 years ago in France, the offer of PBSA was quite low. And the existing offer was somewhere between poor and shitty experience with no services. And he really wanted to fix this by offering great experience to people who are interested in services and who are able to offer to buy this experience. So that's why we created ECLA with big assets, big residences. The average number of units is higher than 1,000 beds per asset. And the idea was not to create big for the size, but to create something big to be able to offer the great services for every hour clients. That's why we created this brand.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Also, I want to apologize to Marcus because I just pushed past your Q&A. So I'm going to introduce Seb, and then I'm going to come back to the Q&A because we have received some. So Seb, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Sebastian Moiser. I'm part of the EQT Exeter platform. I don't know if you guys know EQT and Exeter, but basically the group was started back in 1994. It was listed in 2019 on the Stockholm Stock Exchange. Today, we have across the different strategies more than 230 billion of assets under management. And the one which is key for us, which is real estate, is named EQT Exeter and has approximately 30 billion of assets under management. So I joined the group back in 2020 when we basically opened the French office, because in the past there was no French office. And French is key for the group, as you said, actually, because we have two basically main strategies that we deploy across the country, which is one, logistics. We have more than 1 million square meters of logistic assets, and B, living assets. And on that, we do like build to rent, we do PBSA as well, and we want to expand actually across the country.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to dig into a little bit deeper into both of your guys' knowledge and expertise. But I'm going to invite Aranima to the stage to ask Marcus some of the audience questions.
Thanks, Kelly. We do have 2 questions. The first question is, how do you see the demand balance between international and domestic students for the new generation of private PBSA?
Well, goodness me. I guess that it may actually be one. I'm going to sort of sidestep this a little bit. I think that obviously sort of there's a requirement, you know, with the improvement of the quality of product, and I think the marketing expertise that these machines and operating platforms have, so they're able to reach that the global student market. They're looking at France better, and attracting them to their places of residence because they're offering a safe, secure environment. It's an all-inclusive rent, typically, and well managed and well maintained. And that's not to say that the other projects that are in the market don't offer that, but I think it's really probably a bit of a safety net for somebody, international student who's coming to France for the first time, to really go on the search on the web, and they see an UXCO, they see a Nest, they see an Octava with Greystar, and just feel safe and secure. And certainly, I guess a lot of this is being driven by sort of parents as well, to ensure that their son or daughter is well catered for. In terms of the split on some of these assets between international and domestic student, then perhaps that may be something for one of the operators to discuss in a little more detail, and I may sort of pass that on to Pierre, actually, because I think that's a very relevant one for UXCO and the cloud with their 2 brands. You know, you've got one that's probably more domestic focused and maybe one that's more international focused.
Yeah, sure. As I said, we have 2 different brands. And the first one is a classic one. Most of our clients are French, and this is what we call the UXCO model. So classic one, the idea is to offer something affordable. We got some services, but this is not the premium offer, and this is quite rational, because in terms of number of beds, this is something between 100 and 400 units. But to be honest, it works because this is a good size, because within this kind of size, you are able to know every one within the residence. So the feedbacks are really good with that kind of type of asset. On the other hand, there is also high demand of, let's say, big assets, but not because of the size, but because of the services we are able to offer. And this is ECLA. This is why we create ECLA. The idea is to offer the maximum of services to our clients. We don't have only 1 or 2 persons to manage the residence, but a real staff to be able to manage the food and beverage, all the events, to be able to welcome properly the clients, and also to manage from the security perspective the residents on a 24 basis. And everything is possible because of the size, because we are able to rationalize all these services for our clients. So the differences between UXCO students and ECLA is the size and also the size of the services. At ECLAS, for instance, the size of the proportion of the services is something around 10% for the classic brand UXCO students, which is more in line with our competitors. It's more something close to 5%. And at ECLA, yeah, the residencies are huge. So ECLA Paraiso, for instance, it's almost 50,000 square meters. So 5,000 square meters dedicated to services. And yeah, this is quite unique. It doesn't exist as of today, except with ECLA. And that's why we are happy to develop this offer with different customers. So for this one, international students and also young professionals are today the main target, with higher than 75% of our clients who are international.
And as well, Marcus, on that, I mean, I would add to the discussion that out of the 3 million students in France, only 400,000 are foreign students, actually international students. So it's a very domestic market, I would say. And it's also key for us, for example, to be able to produce like buildings that will suit local demand and international demand. And we saw, for example, that President Macron said at the end of January that by 2030, he wants to have at least 30,000 Indian students in France. So the goal actually for the country is to be able to be this global marketplace for studies, because tuition fees are pretty low in France compared to the US or the UK, for example. And we have lots of schools that rank among the best according to the FT rankings, for example. So it's kind of the global push we're seeing at the moment in the country.
And do you see, Sebastian, on your project that's coming through in Bordeaux, that being sort of 80-90% domestic student, or do you think that's going to be more of a international flavor?
Well, it depends. I think we have 2 projects in Bordeaux at the moment, and one of them is going to be mainly focused on local demand, actually, people living in the global urban area of Bordeaux, which is more than 1 million inhabitants in total, and 100,000 students. And the second one is going to target more international demand based on its location and amenities as well.
And I think it's been really interesting. One of the barriers to entry historically about France has been, I think, the thought that many students or most domestic students study in their hometown university, rather than going away to university, as is probably no commonplace. Certainly in the UK, my kids can't wait to get to university and leave home. And I think that is a bit of a myth, isn't it, from in the French market? There's certainly a high proportion that are now going to traveling from north to south and south to north.
Yeah, and it was actually changed as well by the current government, because they completely reshuffled actually the way people can go to universities. In the past, it was based on your location. So if you were living in the suburb of Paris, you would study like in Nanterre, for example, or in Saint-Quentin. But now, actually, the allocation of university spots are based on actually demand and like global flows. So you could get a spot in Marseille or in Bordeaux or in Lille, even if you live in Paris. So the idea is to make sure that students travel across the country and are able to benefit from the different expertise we can see in the region as well.
And it's particularly right for the big cities in France. You mentioned, Sébastien, Lille. We are considering a big project in Lille, probably an ECLA. So something between like 800 beds. And in this city, the decohabitation ratio is quite high, a bit more than 70%, meaning that 70% of the students in Lille are coming from another city than Lille, including the international students. So, but it's not the unique market like this.
Lille's a really interesting one because obviously, the supply and demand dynamics, and obviously that domestic cohort moving, looking to study in that city, which naturally is, and the demand there is naturally going to drive rental growth. And I think, again, it would help if you could just talk through some of those rents, now how you're able to capture that rental growth sort of year on year, the type of contracts that a student will sign up to. And I think also with Lille, there is an area within the city that has got a rent control in place, if I'm not mistaken. So Pierre, just if you're able to just
what I can share is that it depends on the asset, it depends on the brand, but there is a turnover each year between 40% and 60% of our clients. So it's also for sure we are quite sad about it, but it's also an opportunity to update our rents, and with new customers we have this possibility to do it easily and freely. And if we look at the past years, we are always able to do better than the indexation. So this is one of the particularity of this asset class. We are able to outperform the indexation. Not sure to be able to say the same thing for office market as of today. This is why we are quite confident about the potential of this asset class. Regarding the clients who decide to stay in our residence because it exists, then we apply the index dedicated to housing, and there is a cap at 3.5%, but it's not zero. So in the end, we are quite happy about the evolution on a like-for-like basis of our turnover.
Sebastian, I know that we've had a conversation around the office environment and also the opportunity there in terms of looking at existing start transformation and so on. It'd be interesting to hear, kind of what's the EQT's approach to that?
Yeah, sure. And on that, the number I always have in mind is that if you look at the Greater London area, you have like 28 million square meters of offices. And if you look at the Greater Paris area, you have like 56 million square meters of offices. Technically, as we can see in the press, apart from the CBD, like most of the office locations across the Greater Paris area, for example, suffer a lot. There is vacancy across the entire region. And so I think we all look at that, which is what can we do with those buildings? Because some people would call them the zombie buildings because to occupy space, but they don't host actually companies. They are like half vacant or even more. And so the whole idea is to say, we are looking at lots of opportunities whereby we would convert offices, obsolete offices, and sometimes obsolete is not just by the state of the building, but just by the location of the building actually, and convert them into like PBSA assets. And on that, actually, you face a couple of issues, I would say. First of all, the zoning actually is the main one, because some people will invest in, I would say, co-living assets, which are like basically PBSA, but with commercial use. And some people like us will favor actually the residential use, because we prefer to make sure that students in our buildings can benefit from the state subsidies, which are quite generous in France. Also can stay for like a year or more, which is not always easy with the commercial use. And therefore basically build them the best student housing we can. And on that, so you have to deal with the zoning, of course, and with the local mayors as well. And what we see is that some of the local mayors are actually not in favor of this transformation, because when they lose an office building, they also lose the taxes associated with it. And when they have a new actually residential building, they will actually not get new taxes or limited ones, actually, just only the land tax actually. And so it's always a debate between like having like obsolete vacant office or welcoming more students in the city, which also implies having more like infrastructure, like lines of bus, and also I would say like public services as well. So we are looking at that. It's not that easy. On the paper, it works super well, but the cases that work in real life are quite limited, but we are on most of them at the moment.
I do think that one of the challenges, I guess, something that might slow that down even further, obviously, will be elections on the horizon. There'll be some mayors that are definitely more in favour of that. So I guess Pierre and so you're looking at those areas, those mayories that are probably more focused on wanting to try and bring forward and regenerate their areas opposed to others.
Yeah, and the next elections for municipalities are in 2026, so it's 2 years from now. And yeah, of course, like a year before the elections, actually lots of cities will stop analyzing new projects like this. So I think now is actually the right moment to do so, because they are open to discussion and they are willing to make things change. So yeah, but it could be, of course, a roadblock at some point. And then you have to wait for end of 26, basically, to start again on those conversions.
Yeah.
So we've got 9 months. 9 months to fill the void, and Pierre probably do a similar transformation of the Groupama building at Noisy that you carried out a couple of years ago, to bring that into La Défense or no other sort of high profile areas.
Yeah, I would say the first project of transformation from an office building between something else is always the most difficult. But at UXCO, this is behind us. I talked about the ECLA brand. So we have 3 ECLAs operated as of today. And one of them is a global refurbishment from an office building, a bit more than 30,000 square meters. It was the headquarters of Groupama, French institutional insurance company, and we build residential. And at the very beginning, it was, I would say, it was not that difficult, because the building used to be vacant for years. And we were able to bring a real solution for the municipality. So they were quite open to our project at the very beginning. So that's great. And today we build something new. We recreate live in this area, and the mayor is super happy about it. Because there is a real brand services. It's a good thing for the city, even if there is this tax issue. I would say the thing is, for years, PBSA was like le parent pauvre versus the other asset classes, because it was almost always easier to consider something different than PBSA. But with the real estate crisis linked to the office market, it changed. But then the mayor, every mayor didn't realize this. So I think it will be a bit more difficult for some municipalities to realize that it's not possible anymore to get office building, and to do the conviction process. It's interesting to get a good storytelling and a feedback, and the change we have at UXCO. It's not only storytelling. We are able to show the mayor how an ECLA works. If he has 2 hours to spend with us in Paris-Noisy, Paris-Villejuif, or in the Plateau de Saclay. And this is how we are able to make the difference.
Yeah, somebody just asked in the audience, in the questions here, are the services run with its own staff, or do they aggregate partners to offer these types of services?
Yeah. Kellyanne, can you repeat, please?
Sorry, somebody just asked in the questions, does EQT like run as all the services with its own staff, or do they aggregate partners to offer these services?
We do it internally for almost every services, so including F&B. The only thing we outsource are the cleaning, the security, and also the maintenance, the technical part. So we have a technical team dedicated, but yeah, the people who do the repairments are also outsourced. Except that, everything is in-house.
Thank you, Marcus. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, fine. No, it's all right. I was just going to ask you, we talk about offices. There's obviously hotels as well that we can look at reconverting that use for students as well. Those may have different sort of regulations around whether that's rent, but also service provision as well. Maybe that's just something to touch on, Seb.
No, of course. And on that, basically, I think these are two different types of products, basically, because if you have a commercial use, actually your occupation will be a mix of like short stays, I would say stays of a couple of weeks or month, and like long stays as well, which are more similar to residential. And in that kind of building, basically, you will need more FTEs to operate the building because you need to manage the daily turnover of a hotel. And therefore, I would say it's a totally different product, because if you look at the traditional PBSA, I would say, actually the one that we look at, the number of FTEs on site actually linked to the number of rooms we operate is always quite limited, because we want to have long-term tenants in the buildings. And at the end, when we sell the buildings, actually, we compare ourselves to residential product, because it's a residential actually use, and the way we operate actually is closer from residential with like very long stays. So I would say if you look at commercial versus residential, it's two different products. One is more like hotel, and one is actually proper residential.
And at UXCO, we also have the same position than you at EQT, because we believe that yeah, residential is the good way to process for the reason you mentioned, and also because of the liquidity and the valuation perspective. It's for us the right solution. So within our pipeline, I would say that more than 90% of our pipeline is linked to a residential use.
Perfect. No, that's really, really helpful, and I think sort of clears up hopefully some of those rules and regulations in the French market. But I think one other thing, I touched on how the market has evolved over the last sort of 20, 30 years, being predicated off smaller assets, 100 to 150 units with leases in place. And that consequently had an impact on yields, as there were tax incentives. So individual investors were able to pay into the low threes in terms of net initial yields for those smaller assets. The direct let model is still evolving in France, and I would say 2016 was the first opportunity for major operators or major investor to enter that space with the acquisition of Clay. To be fair, before that, Jacina had started their Campusea brand back in 2012, and were definitely the founder almost. The scale of their assets is obviously sort of completely different to what has been delivered in the past. What's sort of driving, Seb, your view on the optimum number of units in a scheme? And obviously, then we can replicate that with UXCO.
Yeah.
Yeah. and on that, actually, it's a very good question, because if you look at things in France, you have to pay for the land tax, which is quite a heavy sum, I would say. And it's not being reduced year on year, clearly not. More than 50% increase last year in Paris, for example. And so this land tax will actually net off 8 to 10% of your GRI. And then if you add to that the cost of the FTEs and other, I would say, traditional OPEXs, to be able to have like a profitable actually PBSA asset, you need to have at least 200 units. Below that, it can work, of course, on a very, I would say, small example, but the majority actually of the country works above 200 units. And so, of course, if you can get to like 300 or 400 units, it's even better. But I think for me, the minimum size would be at least 200 units.
Yeah, to add a few feedbacks, because at UXCO we have different kind of asset, two brands, different sizes. The conclusion is that there is no perfect size that you are able to replicate in each city. The reason why is that Paris is not Lille, Lille is not Saint-Étienne. So at UXCO, we cover this market differently. So yeah, I'm in line with Sébastien. It's better to get 200 or 300 beds in a residence versus less than 100. Because in the end, the staff will be almost the same in this range of size. But you also have to consider the market. So at UXCO, we aim to target the top 20-25 cities. There are some cities where big residence is too much for the city. So we are also happy to keep working on smaller residences. So I would say 200 is a good target. And with ECLA, this is something different. This is not dedicated to average cities. We are focused on the top 8-10 cities in France because we really want to develop the clients. It's a PBSA offer, but it's mainly a co-living offer. We are also able to address young professionals. The short term is also part of the offer. That's why we need to focus on the big cities. And to finish on this, the good target for us is a bit more or less 1,000 units in Greater Paris area. Because of lots of students, roughly 750K students. There is also a young professional. Most of our clients are also international ones. And in Paris, the basis is so high. So we are able to address significant residencies. And for major regional cities, we believe that ECLA is also a great opportunity, but with a range below 1,000 units. And we are a bit higher than 500 or 600 units for the cities outside Paris.
But I guess with ECLA, it is a real unique opportunity, as you've mentioned. It has both students, it's been a co-living, so there's that sort of flex living angle to it. But again, it's economies of scale over you look at Massy, 1,800 units. You've got such a plethora of amenity space within that development, within that project, that is again highly unique to the French market. Sébastien, are you focusing on a sort of highly amenitized product as well? Is that something that you're looking at in your design?
Yeah, I mean, on that, actually, we use a couple of like architects and interior designers to work on it. The idea is to be able, it depends, of course, on the location, because if you look at one of the assets we have in Bordeaux, which is like in the city center next to like plenty of like bars, gyms, and so on, you don't need to provide for like lots of common areas for that, because the local environment will provide them for you. But what we need to have at least is to have the best product we can hope for on the markets, and use the UK standard we have, and like of course a gym, of course a study room, make sure we have like playroom as well, like cinemas and so on across the building, to make sure that it's actually something new and nothing compared to the old, I would say, PBSA in France, which was sold like on a unit by unit basis to private investors. And of course, the developers were not making money out of the gym or out of the theater room. And so they were not willing to put them in the building, whereas we don't, because we want to make sure actually we offer the best experience for our tenants.
Okay, guys, it is time. Thank you so much for that input. Do you want to, is there anybody that would like a 30-second summary before we close off? Pierre, anything you want to leave in the abyss of the audience today?
Yeah, wanted to share something that I find interesting to the audience, because in France, let's say that France may be considered as a complex country with a complex regulation and more and more complex every year. But there is quite a good news as of today. We spoke about the office opportunity for PBSA market, which I really believe in. The good news is there is currently a law proposal. It was proposed in December 23, and it will be discussed next month between members of French Parliament. And there are articles really interesting for us to keep in mind. The first one is that the idea is to make it easy to change the PLU, so the urbanism master plan, to approve change of use from office to resi, while it is forbidden as of today. So it is a good thing for us as a PBSA players. And there is also the idea to create a reversible building permit. So it was a specific scheme for the Paris Olympic Games project. So resi for athletes and then other use after the Olympic Games. But the idea is to keep this good idea to allow from day one an owner to change building use during its lifetime. So it's still a project as of today, but likely to be approved this year. So quite confident that it will bring opportunities for the next few years in France.
Very interesting, Pierre. Yeah, definitely. Please keep us updated with how that progress comes. I'm sure that will be a really influential and an exciting opportunity for everybody there. Seb, anything you just want to close on?
No, I mean, what I would say as well is that, yeah, clearly France could be seen as complex, but I mean, the idea is to have like local people as well operating on this market, which we believe in at EQT. We have like this local approach, and it works actually. And I would say with like 97% occupancy rate actually, and such low provision rates, there is like a huge actually headroom for players like us to invest in this asset class. And we can see like the market is moving as well, which is good. And we hope to do like a lot more.
So I think this is an amazing time to close. I think you can tell the optimism and excitement from Marcus, Seb and Pierre around this market and the tons of opportunity at hand in the near future. So I hope you enjoyed our French forum today. We have also a collective of other forums happening throughout the year, and obviously the class conference, the annual conference, which is happening in Manchester in the UK, 13th and 14th of November. Also, if you are joining us and have a tech interest, the Class Foundation are also hosting this Smart Student Living Summit in Amsterdam on the 5th of March, all things technology and innovation. So thank you again. We'll be doing a follow-up with some takeaways. And also, if I'm sure our panelists will take any additional questions via email if you so wish to do so. I wish you a really wonderful rest of your day and weekend, and hope to see you in person next time soon. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, Yola.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.